Well, I don't know how much more of a welcome y'all need after that, but here I am anyway. Hi, everybody. I'm Asali Devon Ecclesiastes. I am the Chief Equity and Executive Officer here at the Ashe Cultural Arts Center, as was mentioned over here. So, oh, that must have been Mama Vera. This is the house that Doug built. This is the house that Carol B. Bell built. And I am so honored to be able to shepherd what they have planted here for us in community. And what they have planted is a community development organization that is truly devoted to the people and the culture of where we stand. They are truly devoted to the people, places, and philosophies of the African diaspora. We are truly devoted to equitable outcomes for all of our people, and we stand on it every single day. You're going to hear some amazing conversations brought to you today by the Data Center, one of our most beloved partners, even though Lamar's not on my board anymore. But the work is exemplary and has been for a very long time, and it has enabled us to know more about ourselves, to articulate things about our reality and our environment that make us better people and that make our solutions more possible. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to Brookings for partnering with Data Center to help us to really identify who and where and what we are 20 years after an experience that was singular in all of our lives, right? We're here to revisit it now. We're kicking off an amazing week of action, the Katrina 20 Week of Action. Please, katrina20.org, look it up. 94 events across the region in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama that people have come in this room to plan over the last year. And so we are so excited that it's happening. Just a quick plug, go see our Katrina 20 exhibit. Go see our community health workers who are artists and culture bearers who work to lessen the 25 to 30-year disparity in life expectancy between Black and white New Orleanians. We are here for those solutions and so much more. Welcome to Ashe. Be with us, stay with us, stick with us, kick it with us. We're those people. Y'all gonna like it. But right now, I'm excited to welcome Lamar to come and bring us into this very critical conversation.
Welcome, everybody. How's it going? Good, good, good. Good to see you. Good to see you. I have decent home training, so before I start, I'm going to just thank some folks. I want to thank the Brookings team, Andre, for connecting us. The Data Center would not be the organization that it is today had it not been for the work that Brookings partnered with us on just after Katrina. So the benefit that we are to the New Orleans community, in part, thank Brookings for that. I want to thank, yeah, we can clap for them, absolutely. I want to thank John Legend's team for elevating this event, making it something that will be seen across the nation. And just about most importantly, I want to thank the Data Center staff for the work that they've done. If you're here, just raise your hand, stand up, just make yourself known in some way. For months and months and months, these folks did more work than you could ever ask someone to do. They had fewer nights of sleep than I think they've ever had with us. And I promised them that that day would come, and it did. I appreciate all of that. Thank you so much. I also want to thank all the funders who absolutely made this possible. Your generosity in funding with us we needed that to make it happen, obviously. So W.K. Kellogg Foundation, thank you, I appreciate it. J.P. Morgan Chase, Entergy, Foundation for Louisiana, Baptist Community Ministries, Methodist Health Systems Foundation, Greater New Orleans Funders Network, the L.O.S. Freeman Foundation, the Rosemary Foundation, the Zumuri Foundation, and the Keller Family Foundation all helped to fund this effort that you see before you today. And Brookings, who also helped fund this work, made it possible for our authors to receive a stipend beyond what the Data Center has ever been able to pay for the wonderful work that you've done. So thank you for all of that. I actually don't have a lot of time, but we have a lot of data. So I'm gonna jump in, and I'm gonna go really fast. Don't worry, whatever you miss is on the website, okay? Next slide, please. Go to the next slide. If there's a clicker, I don't have it. There we go. Next slide again. All right. So we're talking about Metro New Orleans today, y'all, and we're talking about Metro New Orleans because New Orleans isn't by itself. You cannot have an economy that is just a single city. It stretches across municipal borders to all the places where we live and work. So when we talk about the economy, when we talk about resilience, we must talk about all of us. It can't just be Orleans Parish. It must be all the parishes in our region. So that's the area that you see, the metro area, the 8-parish metro particularly, is what we're talking about. Now, the natural tendency, the natural urge at this time of year is to think about New Orleans pre-Katrina and New Orleans now, right? Compare us, who we were then to who we are now. We are specifically not doing that. We are intentionally not doing that because New Orleans is a different city. The people here are different people. The state and federal context is a different one than it was years ago. We are not going to do a pre and post comparison. Instead, we are going to talk to you a bit about what it means for New Orleans to be ready for the next thing that could happen, the next disaster that could come our way, that will come our way inevitably. And what that is resilience. So that's what we're here to do, talk about resilience and where New Orleans is in terms of resilience. Now, the simple definition of resilience is the ability to bounce back to pre-disaster trends, right? Whatever was going on before, if you are resilient, you are back where you started when the disaster is past. Simple definition of resilience. What we want to do what we've done in this report and the collection of reports that go along with this is to look at whether or not we have what we need to bounce back from the next disaster, right? When the next Katrina level event comes, we want to know, does New Orleans have the infrastructure, the systems and institutions to both empower and protect its people next time this happens? So that's what we're really focused on with this work. And we have to focus on this work because each parish in Metro New Orleans has had at least 17 declared disasters since 2020, 4 times the national average, making Metro New Orleans a national outlier. That is not to say other places haven't had disasters. As you can clearly see on the map, many other places have had significant disasters. We know Florida, other parts in Louisiana see disasters. The East Coast sees hurricanes as often as we do. There's flooding across the country, wildfires in the West. So it is not that only we have disasters, we just happen to have a few more of them. So it's more important for us to be resilient than elsewhere, than anywhere in the nation. Hurricane Katrina and COVID were significant blows to our metro area. What you now see is about 10% fewer jobs and a 7% smaller population than in 2000. That suggests that we aren't there yet in terms of resilience, right? We do not have the capacity that we need to bounce back in the way that we need to. Moreover, during this time, the economy in Metro New Orleans shrunk at a time when across the nation there was robust growth in many other metros. And what that tells us is, again, that we do not have the economic diversity, we do not have the economic strength and resilience that we need to be competitive in the way that we need to in our region and across the country. So a resilient metro is one that isn't trapped in cycles of disaster and disaster response. And in particular, it has these several factors that you see as part of it within its region. It has strong infrastructure and housing. It has a diverse economy. And by diverse, we mean diverse in terms of the industry sectors that are in that economy. We have robust entrepreneurship. We have a large share of skilled and uneducated workers. Wealth that can provide adaptive cushioning. When we say wealth, we don't just mean the dollars in your pocket and in your bank account and the assets that you have, but we mean government and philanthropic support as well. It means that there's wellness. It means that there's a strong attachment to place that we call social cohesion. It means that there's a small gap between folks that have and folks that do not have. It means that community problem solving is on display all the time and ready to be deployed. These are the things that we think of and that we look to measure when we think about resilience in our region. And so we're going to do that through 4 different lenses: housing and infrastructure, economy and workforce, wealth and people. I'm only going to talk to you about a couple indicators from each of those sections. I invite you to go to our website to see the rest. We're going to start off with housing and infrastructure. Since October 2023, just over 4,000 roofs have been fortified. I know some of you may know about the Fortified Roof Program. That is the program that allows us to ensure that our roofs are protected and capable to withstand the hurricane-force winds that come our way. It also means that you are likely to get a lower insurance rate with a fortified house, right? The more people we have with fortified roofs, the better our insurance circumstances can be. As I said, about 4,000 roofs have been fortified. That's only less than 1% of the properties out there, though. So still a long way to go. It's a new program, so we're going to say that we're on the right path. Not that anything has gone wrong. We're not going to say that. We're going to say that we're on the right path at this point. Now, of the 4,000, about 1,600 received the state grant, which means a bunch of folks did it on their own. We need to continue the ability for folks who can to do it on their own and for the state to pay for the rest. 85% of properties in Metro New Orleans face a major or great risk of experiencing some level of flooding within the next 30 years. You can see, as you would expect, Orleans, Jefferson, and other local parishes are in that. What we mean by extreme or severe risk here is that there's at least an 80% cumulative probability of flooding within that region within 30 years. So that's what we're talking about here. 85% of properties across our metro face that circumstance. That means those within the levee system and outside the levee system. From 2013 to 2023, Louisiana experienced 198 hours of power interruption. You all may recall Ida recently. Big Category 5 storm that came our way. Did not do the damage that Katrina did. There was not water in the streets for weeks as before, but we did lose power for weeks, right? So the way a disaster is shaped can happen in different ways. That's why it's all the more important for our power infrastructure to be resilient, to be able to withstand the disasters and other such things that come our way. You can see here that Florida and Maine also had significant trouble with their power systems for different reasons, of course, but it's one of those things that New Orleans and our metro area, Louisiana, really has to push towards improving. I'm going to jump into economy and workforce quickly. I would like to really talk through economies and how to talk about them, but I can't. I really like pretending to be an economist because it's fun. But I will give you this little bit primer before we get going with this. There are essentially 3 types of jobs in the metro area. There are traded cluster jobs, there are local serving cluster jobs, and there are government jobs. What you see is that those traded cluster jobs are the ones that bring in external revenue from outside of our region, and they are the drivers of growth in your economy, right? Local serving and government jobs tend to be the result of economic growth, right? You can be a teacher or a nurse nearly everywhere, right? So people don't come here to be a teacher or a nurse. They can do that in their own hometown. Those are local serving jobs, right? If you were coming to work in the water management industry, though, this might be the place to be. You might not do that in Kansas. You might come here to do that. No shit on Kansas. They don't have a lot of water. Here is where the opportunity is to explore and exercise expertise in that space. So you would attract people. That's a traded cluster job. There's typically a 2-to-1 ratio, somewhere around 2-to-1 ratio in terms of local serving and government to traded jobs. So that means that there's fewer traded than local and government jobs. But traded cluster jobs tend to pay more, right? Another one of the reasons that they help drive our economy in important ways. So with that understanding, we want to go into the first set of economic numbers here, and we want to point out these are traded cluster jobs, the top 10 traded cluster jobs, and we have at the very top hospitality and tourism. It is our #1 industry. We do have the most jobs in that industry here. Water transportation, oil and gas, production and transportation come right after hospitality and tourism. And as you can see, with the exception of hospitality and tourism, they do pay significantly, water transportation and oil and gas. And in fact, they pay at about the U.S. average. So even here in New Orleans, these jobs pay at the U.S. average. If you look a little bit lower down, and these are all special. So to be a traded cluster, it means that you have to specialize. In other words, there are more of these kinds of jobs here than there are elsewhere, because there's something about here that makes it better to locate that industry in this particular place, right? Performing arts, as you can imagine, is concentrated here. Video production and distribution, concentrated here. You see environmental services, which includes water management. What I want to point out about performing arts and video production is that even though these things are so critical to who New Orleans is, if you look at the average salaries, the average salary in New Orleans is less than the national average in these traded cluster industries. So some work to do in that space. Local serving clusters, the health services is what stands out. Health services are growing across the nation, but growing particularly fast here in New Orleans. One of the things that we know New Orleans for is its creativity and innovation. Well, that shows up in entrepreneurship as well. We have a higher rate of entrepreneurship here in New Orleans than we do around the country. In fact, the rate of business startups spiked post-Katrina and remains 35% higher than the national average, 29% higher than the large metro average. Bright spot for us. The Metro New Orleans share of adults with a bachelor's degree at 35% has reached parity with the nation, but still lags a bit behind the other 49 major metro areas. So that means we've made progress, parity with the country. We have little ways to go to catch up to 50. So now we know what we have to do, right, in terms of education for adults. Moving on to wealth. This data set is close to our heart because the data center innovated this data set. There was no local wealth data available anywhere across the country, so we produced it. And soon what you see this week is that we will give that data back to the nation by making it available for every metro area across the country, right? And it's important because wealth summarizes all the things that are happening in our lives. It summarizes what's happened in the past to us and our ancestors, what we're going through now, and what we may face in the future, all captured in that one number. And what we see is that white New Orleanians have about 10 times the net worth as black households, 7 times the net worth of Hispanic households. Interestingly, we think of wealth as just a thing mediated by class, but that doesn't, or socioeconomic things, but even that doesn't quite bear out. We see that wealth among black college graduates is on par with that of white households, particularly for the 55 to 64 age range right there. As you can see it, we see that for white households without a college degree, they are on par with black households with a college degree, right? So there's more at work here than just socioeconomics. I also want to show you the chart on the left there, where we don't talk about the racial wealth gap. We talk about the wealth gap, because the bottom third, everybody is having a hard time with wealth, right? There's an issue here that is universal when we talk about wealth. It is also the case, though, that in order for Hispanic and black folks to be on par with white households, you have to be a fairly affluent black or Hispanic person. That's what it takes to be on par with the average white person, the median white person in New Orleans. They're telling me I'm short on time, so I have to go even faster. The greatest asset that most of us has is our house. That's at risk since insurance rates are increasing. We have to work to make sure that those rates allow us to insure that asset the best that we can. While poverty rates have fallen in New Orleans from 28% in 1999 to 23% in 2023, they've grown in the rest of the metro. So what you can see here is a shift from poverty being something that we think of in the urban spaces to something that we now see largely in the suburban spaces. Now, that's not just a New Orleans thing, that's happening around the country, as reverse white flight causes folks, more affluent folks, to come back into urban spaces, and in some cases pushing out folks who have fewer resources into the suburbs. Philanthropic capacity in Metro New Orleans is about half that of the national average, and it's among the lowest in the 50 largest metros. And so our wealth is not just the wealth that we ourselves have, but the wealth that we have in terms of the ability to give to others. And we simply don't have the philanthropic capacity here that we see elsewhere, which is why I very much appreciate those national funders in the room who made the commitment to fund here in New Orleans after Katrina and stayed. Quickly now. 1 in 5 in the Metro New Orleans resident are 65 and older. Some of that is baby boomers aging, just getting older, but some of that is that we just have fewer children, right? And so when you work the numbers out, we now have a higher share of older people in our region than the national average. Roughly 3 out of 4 Roughly 3 out of 4 New Orleans residents were born in Louisiana. I think this is something that we all intuitively know, right? Folks who are here have been here, and their families have been here for a long time. When we get here, we stay here because we like it here. We have a higher nativity rate here than in just about any other place around the country, at 71% of folks who are here having been born here. Social aid and pleasure clubs, this plays a critical role in fostering social cohesion. It facilitates community engagement, it expands interpersonal networks, and enhances the individual's sense of belonging. We know this. We know that there are many social aid and pleasure clubs that we are involved in, many of us involved in, and they create great times for us. They second line with us on the street, and they march with us down the street during Mardi Gras. But in the in-between time, they also help us make ends meet, right? And they do service work and things like that. Now, this chart shows us as second to Philadelphia. I don't think we're second. I think we're number one. But the data said we're second, so we're second. We don't believe it because the caveat here is that it all depends on how those organizations have designated themselves, right? So there are some organizations that don't show up. Zulu is not in this data. Yeah, right. Because of how they're designated from a tax perspective. And so many have been captured here. We think not all. If you were to catch everybody, you'd probably be number one. Right. All right, I'm gonna try to wrap it up here. Metro New Orleans needs additional investment in strong housing and infrastructure. We've done well with the investment that we have, but it needs to continue. The job is not done. We need more. We need to keep pushing forward. The economy is more diverse than it was before. Also a work in progress. Tourism is now number one. Even tourism folks will say, we wish we were not number one. We wish we were number 3. Having a greater diversity of businesses means that our children, my children, after they're being educated, might stay if there were jobs here for them and diversity of jobs here for them. Adult educational attainment has caught up to the nation. We still have some work to do to be one of the most competitive in the nation. Material wealth is in short supply, period. We have a lot of wealth in other places, wealth in community, wealth in this room in terms of relationships, but material wealth is in short supply. Social cohesion, we do well. It's one of our strengths in terms of New Orleans and its resilience and our ability to respond and restore ourselves when disasters do strike. All Americans must plan for the climate shocks that we are feeling now and are ahead. This is not just a New Orleans issue, and it's one of the reasons why you don't simply say, we'll just let New Orleans fall by the wayside because they're too expensive to continue to protect. Why would you do that when many cities across our country are facing that exact same outcome? What other American city would you suggest we should not come to the rescue of? Why should we suggest it of New Orleans? Does it mean that we don't care about New Orleans as people the same as we do about other places? It's not my question to answer, but we shouldn't ever suggest that there's an American city that we're going to simply abandon because we don't want to put forth the will to make sure it's safe. There's enough resources in this country to make it happen. This is not an issue of us not knowing what resilience is or how to measure it or how to get it. It's just a matter of us being intentional about whether or not we will, right? And so with that, you can check out this full index. We have a collection of 14, 15 different papers, each going deep into these topics. Check it out, hours of reading for you. You won't get tired, it's a lot of stuff. Please read it, we spent a lot of time. And it's good stuff, thank you, Azali. You can find it both on our website and on Brookings' website. Thank you for featuring that on your homepage, on your site, so that folks can understand New Orleans from a data perspective. We appreciate that. And with that, I think I have hopefully set a context for you for where we are and what resilience is and what we need to do. We now need to move into the discussion portion, right? Give community a chance to really talk through in panels and with these panelists what these things mean on the ground for folks. And so I want to invite up the esteemed Norman Robinson to lead the first panel.
Thank you for that informative discussion. How y'all are? Ashe.
Ashe.
I am Norman Robinson, your lovely and talented moderator for this panel on measuring progress in the metro area towards resiliency. I am a former Harvard University Nieman Fellow, a former CBS White House correspondent, and a former chief news anchor for WDSU News affiliate, the NBC affiliate here in New Orleans, from which I retired in 2014 after a 45-year broadcast news industry career. And I can assure you that our panelists are shoulder ready. And I have vetted them for their expertise. They're all experts because they all own briefcases. I am thrilled to convene this panel of national and local experts, practitioners, civic and community leaders to explore the evolution of New Orleans' physical and built environment 20 years after our catastrophe with Hurricane Katrina. And while our focus is on the local context, we aim for this discussion that we're going to have this afternoon to have national relevance, because we were the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the nation. And my hope is that our panelists will reflect on how New Orleans' journey can inform policy and practice in other U.S. cities to strengthen their communities and resilience. And so without further ado, let me introduce our incredible shoulder-ready panelists. Brenda Breaux is the Executive Director of the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority, where she provides strategic leadership, stability, and growth opportunities for the authority and the community it serves. Dashawn Jordan, affectionately known as DJ, is a New Orleans-born community organizer, urban planner, and designer committed to building economic and community power in opportunity neighborhoods. He serves as Executive Director of Broad Community Connections, leading place-based initiatives focused on community organizing, community wealth building, and narrative change along the Broad Street corridor and surrounding neighborhoods. And Jacqueline Richard, who is the Director of Coastal Studies and GIS Technology at Nunez Community College. With 18 years of education and advocacy experience, Jacqueline has proudly called Louisiana home for the past 22 years and can't imagine ever leaving the swamp. How about that? And last but not least, Robert Fuentes is the Vice President and Director of Brookings Metro. He has worked extensively on developing evidence-based solutions to pressing problems local leaders care about: improved accessibility, a healthier climate, and a stronger economy. So welcome to our panelists. Let's give them all a big hand of appreciation. And as I have discussed previously with our panel, this is a discussion, not an interrogation. I will not be questioning each panelist individually. I had enough ass chewing during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, because I was an ass chewing machine. In fact, to such a degree that they refused to let me interview President George W. Bush. That's a true story. So the first question to our esteemed panelists is, what has worked or not worked in New Orleans recovery? And what can others learn from these experiences? And how resilient is the built environment in New Orleans today? So from your perspective, fire away.
All right, I'll start. And not just because I'm sitting to your left. But what I think that has happened post-Katrina and what we've learned, Lamar hit on it. One of the things that we have really learned is intentionality, and being intentional about where we make our investments, how we make our investments, intentional about the impact of our decision-making to the larger community. All of us all represent the community, not self, but the community and the community at large. The things that we do and how we position our organizations, our investments, I think that's critical. What we have learned is that collectiveness and us being that in doing that, and recognizing that every individual isn't at the same space, and that we really have to have an array of opportunities to be able to provide for everyone, not one size fits all. As I think back about Katrina, and as Lamar mentioned, making a conscious decision, as others outside of this region was attempting to do, to talk about whether or not we rebuild or reinvest in New Orleans, that wasn't a question in any of New Orleanians' mind. It just was how soon, what we need to do, and where we need to do it. And there's truly a lesson learned that recovery and that resiliency is a long process.
What about this idea of intentionality, panel? What about that? Because I mean, that means a lot to me, because I think back initially when we talk about intentionality to the areas that they wanted to turn into green space. And then they said, well, we should have a smaller footprint because we can't provide services to those other areas. It's too hard. So what about intentionality? I like that word.
Well, I think I'll just give a name to those places because I think it's important for us to elevate those. One is New Orleans East, which many people actually don't know, so I want to use this time to elevate, and obviously the Lower Nine. Being intentional is what we've done as a community, and I'll say the things that have worked over these last 20 years is people-powered innovation. I think so often we get put into a position to be engaged as a checkbox and to be consulted on a project that's already been decided. But what we've had the fortune of, and many people in this room were a part of, is bringing community power to every institution in the city to say, this is where resources are going to go. We will not be an experiment, and you need to be designing and co-creating policy and programs and initiatives with us that we can reach instead of creating guidelines that we can never meet because you never designed it for us. So that level of intentionality has always been from the ground. I think about my good sister, Asali, about being willing to go into the city, into the belly of the beast, for our people to take on all of the hits that comes with representing city government and deciding that there will be creativity and community brought there, and there will be national recognition to invest in Claiborne and so many other places. But it's that kind of courage and unfortunately sacrifice that has allowed us to be able to maintain a lot of assets, but most of all, our people assets, right?
Ms. Richard, DJ talked about naming specific areas. You are familiar with Belchase. Your parish president at the time was fighting with the federal government about rebuilding levees that had been destroyed through their negligence. What's intentionality to you?
That's a tough question. I live in Plaquemines
That's why they
Parish.
pay me the big bucks.
Yeah. So I live in Plaquemines Parish, and you know, our parish president and a group of others just single-handedly stopped the largest coastal project in the entire country that would not just protect Plaquemines, but would protect St. Bernard, would protect Orleans Parish. So we have to be careful when we're talking about intentionality, because currently the people in charge are making some intentional choices that are not good for the community at all. And I think the thing that blows my mind continuously, I was fortunate enough to write a paper for this compendium, is the community-led efforts. The community needs to be the one that speaks out. The community needs to be the one that's heard, right? Not just check the box. And that is hard in some of these places, especially when, you know, we talk about education, right? Some people just don't know. I teach community college. You know, I see the byproducts of the K through 12 system, and a lot of people just don't understand their risk at all because they're not taught about their risk. And so when they're not taught about their risk, they're not able to get out there and advocate for their community or even know that they can build a community. So those are things that we really need to return to, and I think it's starkly obvious in the parish that I live in that that is something we really need to focus on.
Let's linger there for a while so that the audience is acclimated to what you're really talking about. You're talking about the barataria.
The mid-barataria sediment
Yes,
diversion.
you're talking about that, which was just stopped by the governor and the state legislature.
Unfortunately.
What kind of damage is that going to do for the metro area?
You know, the way that I look at it, we've all watched those disaster movies, right? When you're at that point in the movie and the scientists are telling you, this is it, this is the last choice, that's what this was, right? This was the last Band-Aid that we could put on before we really have to dig in and make a very choice to be intentionally sustainable moving forwards. And so that was taken away from us. So that means, you know, I own 10 acres of forest that I'm reforesting. My children are not going to inherit that. It's not going to exist in their lifetime. And we have to recognize that if we don't make these choices, if we don't continue to educate, if we don't have these hard discussions and advocate, the city is going to have a very short lifespan because of choices that are made outside of the city.
Mr. Fuentes, as the Vice President and Director of Brookings Metro, in your catbird seat perspective, how do you interpret intentionality?
And I thank you for having me here, and I agree with all of this. And what I think has changed is we're moving from just reacting to the disasters that happen, right? So the disaster happened, federal government, massive amount of investment, $16 billion, and to kind of Band-Aid the problem that was there now. If there's a silver lining, I'm not saying the catastrophic thing that happened, we're starting to recognize, and like a key theme of the reports that came out was living with water, right? So recognizing that this is not something we're going to be able to engineer our way out of. We're not going to be able to build levees high enough. We're not going to be able to do things with hard infrastructure, but we're going to have to do the things you were talking about. Reforestation, green infrastructure, living with water to recognize that the intention is that this is going to happen again. And since in the last 20 years, we've seen this happen all across the country. Sandy in New York, just recently in Western North Carolina, recently in Texas, happening more and more again. So if anything is happening, it's that the nation is starting to understand you have to prepare for these disasters intentionally and not just reacting when the disaster strikes.
Now that brings up a very interesting point, because when I'm talking to people, especially during hurricane season, and we are in hurricane season, and we broach the subject of what happens in the aftermath of the next catastrophe. People always say, they're opine that, well, you know, I guess we're going to have to just pick up and move. So my question to you all is how resilient is the environmentally built area of Metro New Orleans? Are we living on borrowed time? Are we all suffering from some delusional state that we can somehow prevail in the face of the next catastrophe? Who would like to begin tackling that?
I'll go. The question I would push towards that is, where would we go with climate crisis and catastrophe everywhere? Where do we go where we're better prepared than here to create more room? When Hurricane Ida happened, it didn't just impact Louisiana. It went all the way up to New York. And more lives were lost there than here. And so though we're battling climate change and land loss, and we need to be dealing with a strategy for potential relocation, in the meantime, we got work to do. There's places to protect and futures to be building for, and sure, we could be a bit more resilient, I think we are challenged with navigating state politics, and our national climate, everyone in this room knows, it's pretty much a hellfire landscape. So that means we have to tap into more resiliency, which I will not keep asking everybody in New Orleans to be resilient by our standard definition.
Correct.
But I will push on to Lamar and the data center's definition about resilience to be more holistic. That said, I think it's really important to know that all of the creativity and innovation that's been prototyped around the city about being in a climate just future has been community driven. And what is most effective is when those bigger institutions follow the lead of community, because we know what to do.
Yeah, I'd just add a little bit more to that, DJ. I would say is we are clearly much more resilient than what we were 20 years ago. I would say that we have really educated ourselves as to what those impacts might be. 20 years ago, we would have been like, okay, let's roll on out of here. We're gone for 2 days and we'll be back in another. That's it. But we're not that way anymore. When we're making those major decisions as to how we invest in our homes, in our families, we're thinking about resiliency. We're thinking about storm water. How do I retain as much water on my own property before it goes into the public system, the water system there? How am I building something so that I can return within those 3 or 4 days so my darn roof is still on my house and have a place to come back to? How do I protect my family? I would say we have educated ourselves from where we once were. There is still a lot to learn, but we're not afraid to have those conversations now. Before, we would run. We're not afraid of having that and addressing that. And when you think about some of the zoning changes that have been changed and how we are building our house, everybody in this room would probably say, if I got to put a new roof on my house, I'm going to consider a fortified roof. That's what I'm going to consider. You would have asked me that 10, 12 years ago, I would have said no. One of the things we did as a quasi-governmental entity is mandate that as we are building for those people who are most vulnerable. Whether it's home ownership, whether it's rental, it's those little investments. Educating a community in Gentilly that was devastated with water. But to be able to see those families embrace those stormwater management concepts and retaining that and educating their children and their grandchildren, I think that's how we move the needle and continue to move it forward. Every panelist on here has said, it's gonna happen, it's gonna come again. How do we address it and better ourselves so that we're there to be able to respond to that? And that's what we've done as a community. Some we've come kicking and screaming, others come readily welcoming that information.
I love it that you put what we ought to do, but what are we doing? That's the question for me. What are we doing?
We're making those investments in Fortify. We're making those investments in communities. So when we're building more resiliency. We are educating our community, and we're educating ourselves as to what we can do differently so that we can sustain not only ourselves, but the generations to come.
How do you see it, Ms. Richard?
I agree, but I think we need to push forward. You know, Katrina happened, as you said, we're the canary in the coal mine, right? So we're kind of the testing ground for the rest of the country to follow. So I want to challenge us to keep pushing forward. There's amazing things going on, right? For instance, the Buoyant Foundation Project, right? Helping people make their homes floatable, right? Imagine that. But guess what doesn't allow that? Permitting and FEMA, right? So while we are making really amazing strides in innovation and thought for us to live with water, we need to start pushing our elected officials, and we need to start advocating for that kind of work to be done, because that's the only way we're going to be able to live with the water instead of against it.
Mr. Fuentes?
No, and I think it's right, and it's going to come from the bottom up. I mean, we talked about your concerns with state politics. I'm in federal Washington, a little bit of concern about Washington's politics these days. So if there is a disaster, if we need that kind of response from the federal or the state government, it's tough to say that we're going to see something soon. So it's got to come from the local level. It's got to be metropolitan level, as Mark was saying. It takes that kind of approach to deal with these challenges now. It's not going to be a $16 billion fix for these things, but we're going to have to start playing from the local level. It's got to come from the bottom up.
Here's a question that I'm often thinking about, and that is, how do we depoliticize? How do we depoliticize protection and water management? I mean, 3/4 of the Earth's surface is water, and we can't manage it worth a damn. And a lot of that has to do with political policies. So how do we work around politicians? How do we do that?
I think we need to be really careful, especially moving forward, and not privatize national disasters, because that's only going to make this worse.
A lot of it for my organization is coalition building. We know across race and class, when a storm comes, sure, you might be a foot above where flooding is most impactful, and yet you flood. A block away from each other are a movie theater, the Broad Theater, and Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, which both are on Broad Street, and both of them have experienced flooding now 4 times since Hurricane Katrina. And most of those were heavy storm events. But one thing that will get them to the table is a resource, an opportunity to advocate for better infrastructure together. So we're all being impacted by it. Those with enough sense will come to the table, and other folks, like Ms. Brenda said, will need to be dragged. But we can't create policy solutions in a vacuum, and it can't just be imagination with no implementation and long-term stewardship. And what's most important is not that we get the projects done, but that we're arming our community to be good stewards for the long haul, because who's going to take care of us except us?
And I think a lot of this is about money, quite frankly, right? So in Miami, they had a big plan they just released to how they're going to deal with flood protection. It's going to raise taxes, it's going to cost money. They're having issues with that right now. So if we could start talking about these solutions that we're talking about here, things that are cheaper, that are more proactive, that are forward-looking, instead of those things that are reacting, which is way more expensive than dealing with it early, back to the intentionality question, then we're going to have much better chance of building those coalitions instead of dealing with it at the back end.
Well, the only thing I'd add to that, particularly here in New Orleans, we all know that at some point or another, we are going to be having a conversation about some stormwater fee. That's a known. We can scoot in our chair, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's a reality. But if it's a reality, then let's make it that it's one that is functional, that is operational, and we will invest in that which does what it's supposed to do. I think one of the things that we've had here is just not the level of commitment to make certain that those investments really get to where they need to get to. And I think that's where community holds everyone accountable as to where we are and how we make those investments. We've got to invest in ourselves so others can invest in us as well.
How do we get around the cynicism, though, that exists among citizens that politicians are just going to take the money and they're just going to waste it? They're going to engage in political patronage, give jobs to their best buddies and their best girlfriends or their best boyfriends. So how do you convince the public at large that a storm drainage border fee is your saving grace? And
One of.
yeah, how do you do that?
You don't. What?
Just do it.
But to what you said, they are their own saving grace.
Okay.
And I think what we often do is make the solution the most important part of the equation.
Exactly.
And so when the solution doesn't work, people give up, not on the solution, but on trying in themselves. So much of our work day to day is building that sense of optimism and imagination about what is possible despite what they're seeing, but also encouraging people that they can get engaged at every level. We talk about engagement often as a bus, with bus stops. Our job is not to police who comes on the bus in the beginning and rides to the end. It's to make sure that people can get on at every stop, that the AC works, that if there are ADA needs, they can get on and off, and there are people who are gonna go the engagement journey to the end, and there are folks who are gonna come on for 2 stops, give their input, and then leave. But it's important that that vehicle works. So if we're not creating that apparatus that let people show up, it can be as small as a disaster preparation workshop that we've hosted to get people informed on how to prepare their small business or their home to be ready for hurricane season. Or something as creative as an initiative that we have called Broad Green Futures, which is literally speculative in getting people and young folks engaged in imagining what the future might look like for them and their communities. But it can be as basic as, hey, we're planting over 24 trees up and down Broad Street. We're actually advocating and supporting folks to take advantage of energy efficiency resources to get their spaces retrofitted and their roofs fortified. So we have to engage with people in different facets if we want them to go along the journey and remember that they are their own savior.
And it's about functioning, operating and functioning, and the collective operating and functioning. Not one silver bullet, but multiple things, but all going toward the same goal. I think that's what we gotta focus more on.
And I think the engagement does work. We see this, the evidence is what happens on election day when infrastructure measures go before voters to raise taxes, to vote for certain things. So if that's laid out and explained to people, they vote for it. We see 70, 80% of these things pass on election day. So there is this rhetoric and this narrative about lower taxes, but when people actually are there at the ballot box, they're voting for these things because they've been engaged, because they've been presented with solutions instead of problems, to fix something that's already happened. So engagement, I think, is really, really key.
Are we not spending enough time talking about this? I mean, here we are 20 years later, we're discussing it now. But I see very little discussion taking place about this from our public officials during the course of the months, years, days, whatever. There's no discussion. I mean, to me, this is the most important thing that we face. I mean, really, because I mean, no matter how much fighting we do, if we can't stave off Mother Nature, hell, there won't be nothing to fight over. So, do we really need to embrace this as a perennial discussion? And if so, how do we do it?
I mean, I think we have to. We don't have a choice, right? And, I see inside the community amazing conversations that are happening. Those conversations just need to be elevated because the things that I hear and the things that I see, I've taught for 18 years. So I had, adults right after Katrina, and now I'm seeing the children of Katrina, right, in my classes. And they are engaged in their community. So it is working. Right? They're coming to my environmental class with more knowledge than, 18-year-olds 18 years ago had. So it's working. We just need to trust ourselves and keep fighting for that.
And that's something that we need to mandate, not something someone needs to mandate for us.
Okay.
But we should be mandating that. We care enough about our city, enough for ourselves and our generations to come, that we need to mandate that. We don't need somebody to mandate that for us. We need to be requiring that and saying that's what we need as a community to continue to grow. It's us.
That's part of being a good civic participant, is it not?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, let's see how that works. Now,
and you're a great contributor toward that mandate and communicating that, I am certain, sir.
well, let's move on to the elephant in the room. I spoke a little bit about
how much fighting we do. So, of course, addressing threats like flooding isn't the only thing that we're challenged with. We're challenged with how do physical built environment challenges intersect with issues of race, equity, and economic opportunity. That's always the elephant in the room. So how do we address that?
I'll just say quickly that I think that it's a better conversation about infrastructure if it's about those things than it's about infrastructure for infrastructure's sake. I know that sounds wonky, but if we're just talking about infrastructure with engineers, with all due respect to the engineers, we're going to get engineering solutions. But once we take it out of that box and connect it to all of those things, to race and inequality, to economic development, to climate change, then you've exponentially increased the audience for these issues, right? So an infrastructure conversation in its box is not going to be that helpful. We've got to do everything we can to bring it back out and to connect to the things that people really care about.
So how do we do that? I mean, who starts that conversation?
Well, I mean, I'll just say, we're doing it quickly with, for instance, the data center and all across the country. When we talk about issues like transportation, we talked about transit here in this region. If you have a car in this region, you can get to every job in Jefferson and New Orleans within a half an hour. If you're trying to take public transit, it's about 5%. And Jefferson Parish, it's 1.5%, right? So that conversation isn't really about transportation. That conversation is about access, mobility, economic development, all of those things. That's a very different conversation than just what a transit system should be doing.
But I think what you're really saying is that needs to be part of all of the conversations. That's really what one of the answers is, Norman, is that that's part of all of the conversation. And all the work that every one of us up here do every day, it's about equity. It's about neighborhood, it's about communities, it's about engaging, it's about uplifting all of that. It's all of that that we do as we do our work and make certain that our work is grounded in all of those things.
So how do we get past this seemingly intractable barrier? It's like every time you bring that up about disparities, about socio status or racial status, somebody says, oh, you always want to make it about race or poor people. Y'all always got to play the race card. Well, the fact of the matter is, there is this glaring disparity. So how do we broach that without, ripping into each other, ripping your clothes off, or trying to pull your eyelashes out?
I mean, I feel like it starts with education. A lot of the problems that we face in the city and the metro area, whether it's post-Katrina or just everyday life, if we were to invest in the K-12 system and actually make it worth something, a lot of these problems would go away. Because it's been shown that the more educated people are, the less crime there is, the less poverty there is, the more opportunities there are. So really, if we fix the base of the triangle, the rest of it will be built on a solid foundation.
I'll say,
DJ?
all of my conversations about equity and justice, and race is a non-negotiable in that conversation. So I don't hide that, I lean in with it, and those who need to come will come. That doesn't mean the conversations aren't different across different stakeholders, but the reality is, the way to make it plain, when this street floods, you're next.
And it doesn't discriminate.
So it's about being plain, and going beyond that to make sure that our folks are armed with the tools that they need to advocate for themselves. So much of my work, you would think so much of my work is community engagement with our stakeholders, our business owners, our residents. But what I found is more of my job is spent training leaders who we've elected or folks who are supposed to govern and protect us on how to embed equity and justice in everything they do. So from the engagement, to the policy, to the contracts, to the location, every one of those steps has to have equity and justice in it, or I can't be at the table, because I'm not a good advocate for the people that I serve.
So
Go ahead, you can applaud. So we're not overlooking the elephant in the room. We're trying to address it.
I mean, the reality is there's enough people in this room to change the tide of New Orleans and Louisiana. Not everybody's going to be able to join the fight to shape where we go, but we make sure that it is equitable and people have access to show up when they can, have the energy and strength to. But I think we overcount that we have to have everybody to shape the world that we're going to live in when we're living in somebody else's imagination right now. So what is our work to make sure we're shaping something that is just, is equitable, you know, and then allow people to show up from their capacity.
And then just to recognize that it is not a short term, or it's not a sprint. It is a marathon. And it is from beginning to end. And we have to make certain that we are there and participating and active in every portion of that. And someone from the audience said continuous, and you're absolutely right. It's not a start and stop, but it's that continuum that we have to do in our work and what we do, and the community and that we all represent has a stake in that and a role to play in that.
So we are, I guess, the model for the rest of the country?
Yes.
We are? Are we shouldering our responsibility? Are we living up to that obligation?
We're carrying more than our load.
If so, how?
We're carrying more than our load, and we have been for a
Really?
while.
Expand on that, please.
You know, I think there are ways that we can glamorize the amount of resources we received immediately after Katrina. And there are narratives that say, oh, well, you know, money was squandered or it didn't have the impact. But in reality, there was so much Herculean effort from so many different leaders to make sure that resources were touching the ground and creating a transformative impact. And it takes a lot to be imaginative in general, but to do that while in community and trying to create
And
the
in the fight while you are doing
Right.
that, and yet fighting for, and in some instances, fighting against community. And that's because we need to do a better job of making certain that we share and we have that shared vision. And that if there is a deviation from that, how did we get to that deviation and why? And continue to bring everyone on with us. I think that's what we've
Ms.
got to
Bro,
do.
could you break that down? You said something that caught my attention. Fighting against community?
Well, yeah, I can remember as we talked about neighborhoods that we were wanting to invest in, and one of the things I've learned is that community has to be ready for the change at that time. And that is critical. That is very critical. That doesn't mean that change won't take place. It just means that not right now, because that means I might have more work I need to do to help to inform, to maybe for me to rethink what am I doing and why and how we're doing it. It's always the how we do it is so important, and how we come across that. 10 years, we're not ready, they're not ready. Year 14, community ready. And when they're ready, we see this monumental change and shift. But that doesn't mean that we don't stop doing and stop working. That doesn't mean that. That just means that we've got more work to do. There's yet some more work to be done. And maybe it's not now, not here now, but maybe it's here 2 years from now. I think that, and then people have to, there's a lot of trust that every one of us up here have to give to the community, and the community has to trust and believe. And the only way they do that is that we show up, we do what we committed that we were going to do, that our intentions are that of the community, not of self, but of the community. And sometimes we think it's right, and the community's like, no, that's not right now. But that doesn't mean that you go away and then you don't come back, because you still owe that to that community. That's when the work gets really tough.
Stay engaged.
Stay engaged, informed, Get to the point that they're the one that you call, that they call you, look, let me tell you what's happening. This is what I need. Do you all have something that can assist us with doing this? That's when you know you've been toiling in this work and doing it right. And you have that respect coming from the community back to you with the work that you are doing.
This will probably be the last questions. What innovations, whether technological, policy-driven, or community-led, are shaping our resilience today?
I mean, the big one that sits in my parish is FEMA 2.0. That's what's shaping the resilience inside and outside the levees where I live. And, you know, it's a big one, right? Because, you know, you might live on, you know, land that you've had for generations and generations and generations and had homes that are there. And now if your home is destroyed because of a fire, not even a giant national disaster, who can afford, first of all, to elevate a mobile home that now costs over $100,000 that's going to cost, you know, $150,000 to raise? So that shapes the resiliency of my parish, is these policies that are getting brought down by people that don't understand the community. And as a community, we need to find our line in the sand and say, okay, we can't keep doing these things the way that we've always been doing these things. We just can't accept it anymore. We can't accept not having sustainable energy. We can't accept not having, you know, grants to put cisterns in my house because I can't drink the water because it has carcinogens in it. So we need to find our line in the sand and plow through it.
I'll say technologically, I think there is some innovations that could happen with artificial intelligence, especially when it comes to modeling, forecasting. I'm worried about what happens with the federal kind of investment in this, but their technology is coming so fast. We think about some of these weather events, there is an element of AI that can help that. From a policy perspective, there has been such innovation happening across the country, partly because what happened 20 years ago, places like Norfolk and Miami, Seattle, places that are sinking all across the country, are starting to develop these plans and to be proactive, to be intentional, so that they can withstand the threats that are coming. So there is a lot of policy that's happening, planning, the execution, something's gonna have to come later. And then to your point, community-led, I think it's this really cool connection between the workforce and these resiliency efforts. There's a lot of employment potentially here. Lamar talked about maybe this region being a hub for water innovation. If we can make that connection between that resiliency and workforce and those opportunities, we really have something there.
Yeah, I would echo the connection between workforce and resiliency, particularly here as we talk about fighting off 300% increase in insurance. As we talk about that, as we talk about putting in fortified roofing, there is a business and a workforce that could easily be developed as part of that. And as more of those innovations get in place, the cost of doing that clearly comes down, and that it becomes something that's more affordable. I would say that. I would say that the policies that we create in the future need to be futuristic and not based on where we are today or where we once were yesterday, to really thinking about the innovations and planning and for the future as to what we want the city to be.
I would say the innovations that I see are coming from the ground, and I know I've been saying that every question, but I'm daily inspired by groups like Greater Treme Consortium, Ms. Cheryl Austin, who I'd be remiss to not elevate, who was doing environmental justice work before it was sexy and before there was funding. So I want to elevate her. I want to elevate the work that the Water Collaborative is doing on advocacy to really make sure that we're funding and investing in the infrastructure that we need to be resilient. I'd be remiss if I didn't elevate Thrive NOLA and that team training our workforce, the same for Louisiana Green Corps. There are so many people doing the work on the front lines, making the policy legible, making things that have felt dense, light and easy to engage and their opportunities, I think we can just do a better job of putting them together and putting the policy supports under them to amplify them, because again, we're creating the solutions for the future that many of those folks won't benefit from immediately, but generations to come will be grateful for.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes our panel on measuring progress towards resilience. I want to thank our panelists, Brenda Bro, DJ, Ms. Richard, Mr. Fuentes, and I have enjoyed being your lovely and talented moderator. Have a good afternoon.
Just be 1 second, y'all. We have a, whoa, hey. I don't want anybody to think that we're done. So don't leave, don't get out of your seat. Grab something to eat or go to the bathroom if you need to, but come right back. There's another panel to go, okay? You can always count on my wife to cheer me on. Thank you. All right, everybody. What's up, man? Good to see you. We are going to try to get our next panel together. If you're next to somebody who's not paying attention, tap them and tell them sit down. Have a seat. Have a seat. We are going to invite our next panelists, our next panel up. Our moderator for this panel might be the only reason you came today. I'd like to welcome up to the stage the incomparable John Legend. Has agreed to be our moderator for the day. Good. Also joining us on the stage, we have Dr. Andre Perry, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Community Uplift, Brookings Metro. We have Flozell Daniels, the Chief Executive Officer of the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation. We have Sarah Omajola, the Executive Director of the Very Institute for Justice of Louisiana. And we have DJ Johnson, the owner of Baldwin and Company. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, how's everybody doing? It's good to be here, good to be back in New Orleans. We are here to talk about community. We're here to talk about how we can work together to make our communities stronger, more vibrant, safer, more unified, more cooperative, all the things we want for our communities to be so that we can thrive together. All right, we had a great day already today. I walked around with Dr. Perry and many of the members of several communities around this area, showing us all the great work that they're doing in the community. We're so happy to be here at Ashe and learning about the great work that Ashe is doing to keep this community vibrant and thriving. And we're excited to talk to our panelists today and learn the work that they're doing. We want to recognize that we're here around the anniversary of Katrina. We know that Katrina had quite devastating effects on the community, but we also know that with these tests of resilience, with these trials and tribulations that this community faced, we saw a lot of strength, we saw a lot of resilience, and we saw people coming together to rebuild and to rebuild stronger than you ever were before. And it's so exciting to talk to folks who've been part of that rebuilding process, who've been part of making these communities thrive. And one of the things that we do, my organization is called HUMANLEVEL, and we work in communities all around the country. And one of the main things we like to do is go around and learn from each other what's working. And a lot of times folks focus on problems and gaps and disparities, and we study all those things, and we make sure we have great data to understand all those things, but we also want to make sure we understand what's actually working so that we can share that with each other and grow together, improve our communities together all around the country. So we've been able to do that here in New Orleans, but we've also done it in Atlanta, in Washington, D.C., in Detroit, in Los Angeles. We're learning from each other. We're growing together. We're collecting content that we can share with each other. And all of this is going to help us make our community stronger and hopefully make our nation stronger. So I'm excited for this conversation today. We're going to have a good time.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Can everybody introduce yourselves before we get going?
Yes. Good afternoon, fam. I'm Andre Perry, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution. I also lead a center at Brookings called the Center for Community Uplift. Most importantly, I lived here for 14 years. This is my home. In so many different ways.
I saw a lot of deep hugs when he was going around the neighborhoods. Everybody knows Dr. Perry.
Man, but this is such a special place for me. So it's just an honor to come back and present some of my friends and family to you today.
I'm DJ Johnson. I'm the owner of Baldwin & Company. It's a bookstore, coffee shop down in the Marigny. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Born and raised here, and I know the number one question is I went to McMain High School because that's. So yeah, born and raised here. So just a cultural hub of intellectual discovery.
Amazing. I'm Sarah Mojola. I'm the director of Vera Institute of Justice's Louisiana office. I went to Franklin. Number one. Yeah, sorry, you know. I'm also, y'all know. I also am the mom of a 4-year-old and a 2-month-old, and so sleeping is, a suggestion at my house.
Oh, you didn't tell me that. 2 months, Lord.
2 months.
So if she has to exit, we know what's going on, right? Flozell Daniels Jr., I have the privilege of being the CEO of the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation. And born and raised here, I will have you guys know that 3-5 is more than 1. 3-5, okay, that's local high school stuff, y'all. We just gonna do what we can.
I'm lost.
And I had the privilege of being raised uptown And I used to make groceries with my grandmother in this place when it was the Venus Garden. So I'm telling my age, y'all. But this feels like home, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm going to start with Dr. Perry. Dr. Perry and I work together a lot, and I love his perspective because he has a really national perspective that's informed by all the local perspectives. So I want you to help us set the stage for today's conversation just by talking a little bit about the concept of well-being, which is something you study a lot, and help define it for everybody so they understand kind of the framework that you look at when you're thinking about how people are actually living their lives in their communities.
Yes, thanks for that question. Now, when I ask anyone, how are you doing? You know, some people may think about how their day has been, what's going on in their family. Well-being, from a research perspective, it entails all those political, social, and economic factors that go into answering the question, how are you doing? Right? So why it's important in this context? So much that informs how you are doing is connected to community and economic development. Measurably, people in New Orleans report higher levels of well-being than their wealth profile suggests. And we know that culture uplifts people in ways. With that said, and people who know me, they know I know how to throw a party. They know I was fully ensconced in all things New Orleans. With that said, we need home ownership. We need greater business ownership. We need clean air and water. And that requires someone to cut a check. Nothing, you can clap that up.
Amen. Ashe.
Ashe. You know, nothing grows without investment. Nothing. So, and in addition, we don't necessarily have to close wealth gaps for that, so that people can thrive. We can provide the necessary goods and services so that people can live to 80 and live a quality life, right? So I'm always going to be working on the larger structural issues, working to close wealth gaps, but more importantly, we will work to make sure whether you are uptown, downtown, 8th Ward, 7th Ward, wherever, that you have an opportunity to thrive. So that's what we're trying to do.
Let's talk about what it means to thrive. Let's talk about what it means to thrive, especially through community-led investments and involvement where the community takes on leadership. Can each of you talk about a community-led intervention or investment that you see is working in New Orleans right now? We'll start with you, DJ.
Well, selfishly, I got to talk about the work that we're doing at Baldwin and Company.
Talk about it.
The community-led initiative is around reading and literacy. So an investment in literacy is an investment in an economy of ideas. You see, it's like what Earl Nightingale says. He said, you become what you think about. And if you don't read well, you can't think well. And if you don't think well, then someone will do the thinking for you. And that's where we are today, because you have roughly around 73% of New Orleanians, particularly our kids in grade school right now, they read below grade level. So what's happening is we're developing a group of potential leaders who someone else, particularly probably someone else in the federal government, who will do the thinking for them, or someone in the governorship who will do the thinking for them, who will make decisions that will impact them at a city and municipal level, all because we have not invested in literacy. So the intervention that I'm doing right now through my community-led efforts is making sure that everyone has books in their home. So we have a nonprofit organization. It's called Baldwin & Co Foundation, and what we do is we provide free books to kids in the community every second Saturday of the month, led by Entergy. Entergy is our wonderful sponsor for our children's story time. Hand clap for Entergy. we make sure, and we have anywhere from around 50 to 75 families come by, and we make sure that every one of those kids get free books to make sure that we are building home libraries. And part of that effort is making sure that not only are we giving you books, but we're going to assist you with reading. So we have partnerships to whereas we have teachers, they come in their off time, and they provide free literacy tutoring services to help kids learn how to read. So that is one of the greatest interventions in terms of oppression that we can do, because one of the things that John Henry Clark said, he says that powerful people cannot afford to educate the people who they oppress, because once they become educated, they will no longer be oppressed. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
And I just wanted to say, one of the things he did not share that is backed by the data, because empirically speaking, and Lamar mentioned this, that when you look at wealth and education, college graduates actually have the same amount of wealth as black college graduates have the same amount of wealth as white high school graduates, which shows you that education does not predict for wealth, wealth predicts for education. What makes DJ's work also profound, that reading picks up when you have assets on the block. He's buying back the block. So it goes, so literacy and education go hand in hand with economic empowerment. DJ's owning these properties. That's not lost on all that is going on in your educational work. So kudos to you and all you do.
Sarah.
Yeah. So a lot of what we think about when we're thinking about the criminal legal system is that it's very extractive, it's very expensive, and when we think about the criminal legal system, research and experience shows us that that's not actually what's making us safe, right? What actually makes us safe is our community. I think about, back to what you were saying, my 90-year-old neighbor is who is keeping me safe, because she knows I'm there. She also makes a mean cornbread for my child. Which also keeps me safe. But we also know that community violence intervention and prevention and street level interventions actually reduce gun violence and shootings by 30%. And so Vera is really excited to be part of the evaluation team for the Ubuntu Village NOLA Peace Ambassadors, who are doing street level, clap that up. Who are doing street level interventions. And so I have a quick anecdote about, an example of like what this looks like. So we can't quite quantify exactly how many lives are saved, how many people are kept out of the system, all of those things. But we do know that the NOLA Peace Ambassadors went to a kid's birthday party here in Central City. And while they were here at this birthday party, one of them got a call. And that person said, so we were gonna shoot up this block, and we know you're at that party. So we're not gonna do it now, essentially. And the person who was on the phone, the team member, was like, okay, well, what we actually need to do is squash this beef. So who do you have it with? And let's figure out how we actually mediate this conflict. So what they did was sit down, and that takes time. It takes time, it takes relational capacity to mediate that conflict, which is what they did, and that shooting did not occur. It didn't occur later, it didn't occur that day. And through that work, that intervention and that success, what we've seen is obviously no one was harmed that day, but also the trauma, because violence is cyclical, that trauma didn't occur, so we don't have other violence occurring afterwards either, right? And so that is quite a big thing that is occurring. They've also created safe havens in their own offices and made sure to provide mentorship. And so I really just want to name drop that as like a solution that is working, and long-term solutions to long-term issues need sustained investment and sustained support. The other thing I wanted to say too about this is there was a young person who was shot and was in the hospital and was told he might never walk again. And so of course, the immediate response to that was, well, now I'm gonna retaliate on these people who did this to me. But instead of that happening, the NOLA Peace Ambassadors were actually able to provide mentorship and turned his focus on physical therapy instead. And now he's on a full ride scholarship, football scholarship in college, doing well, right? So again, that's another one of those things that is working. And we're working on getting those stories out there because the numbers tell you one thing, but those stories are really indicative of what is really working.
And to be clear, as we talked about earlier today, but let's share with the group, talk about the numbers in New Orleans, but also nationwide.
Yeah, the other thing to know, and you might, if you watch the nightly news, I realize that I feel safer when I don't watch the nightly news, right?
Preach.
It's really the thing that's telling me to be afraid, but actually, crime is down, violence is down across the nation after the stabilization following the pandemic. Crime is down in DC, even though we've been told something different.
Yes.
Crime is down here in New Orleans. Violence is down. I think the number we're at, homicides down by 64%. So these are things that are occurring, and if you listen to the narrative, you would think, oh, this isn't happening, and so we have to revert to, and a lot of our supermajority, our governor think that we need to revert to these tough on crime things, which we know have never worked. And so it is important in this time to lift up those stories in order to make sure that we're not going back to the stuff that is broken and will not make us any safer.
And to put a finer point on it, whenever we invest in more punishment and more policing and all these other things, we only have so much money to play with in these budgets. And so every budget decision that goes toward one thing means it can't go toward another thing. And so it doesn't go to the violence interruption. It doesn't go to investing in buying back the block and doing things in the community to make it thrive and be stronger. So we have to realize that it's a false remedy whenever they say we just need more guns in the hands of the good guys on the street. We need more National Guard in our streets. We need more police in our street. We need to lock more people up to make us safer. It's taking away resources from all the things that actually make our communities thrive. And so we need to continue to uplift the stories of what works when we invest in our communities so that we can counter the narrative of things that are destructive and extractive in our communities getting all the funding.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right, so
Flozell.
part of this conversation for us, especially for those of us who've been here the entire 20 years, this is a conversation about courage and care. And this is about love and leadership. And in every relationship, every iteration or permutation of this work that you all are elevating in this moment, right, it has cost us something to be able to show up in this work. And so I loved hearing John and Andre about you guys going to get on the streets this morning and see what's going on, right? Ms. Beverly McKenna's amazing work on Bayou Road, and some other work we won't even get a chance to talk about. We're sitting here in Ashe Cultural Arts Center because folk from here decided that they were not only gonna buy the block, but they were gonna show up for their communities and put their money, put their time, and put their talents and all of their treasure into the thing. One of the examples I love, at the Foundation for Louisiana, we had a chance to work with the Mardi Gras Indian Council. I was thinking about these amazing corridor projects that you all have already shown us the way in, right? And they had a vision for what it meant to show up for their communities, but they didn't trust that anyone would provide the resources and the autonomy to bring that vision forth. And so led by the council, Bertrand Butler is their manager, people like Chief Howard, Chief Casby, dozens of other folks, they had a vision for that work. They worked with Tulane University. I think Maurice Cox was lead designer at the time. And they brought forth a vision for a Mardi Gras Indian cultural community, cultural campus rather. And so we were able, working with Our Place America, to buy the land and the property, 2 properties, by the way, from 2 black homeowners who were holding the property at the height of gentrification for something good for community. Because relationship matters, right? And because they had relationship, we were able to acquire those properties. They created a design for a place that would end up being a safe space for community, a place where they could educate and train future generations on their craft and their rituals and their sacred practices, the music and the chants and the sewing. It would be an opportunity for them. They literally, the subtitle for the project, y'all, was Eyes on the Park. They were thinking about the children and the role that they've played in looking out for a community. And it would be a place where they would get to own it, lock, stock, and barrel. And to this day, they not only own it, they have been, folks said, well, they're not gonna be able to sustain that property. What's their business plan? You know how they do. It's been sustained beautifully because they have a collective and shared ownership model that works for their community and their culture. And my favorite thing is going to Super Sunday now, and it's open to community. And you can go in and do all the things that you need to do. And it is the place and the space that they've been in for more than 100 years, and they own it. It's one of my favorite examples.
I love that. Let's talk more about ownership. DJ, your vision is rooted in reclaiming black neighborhoods and reimagining how we invest in each other, not just through dollars, but through culture, space, and ownership. Can you talk about how your businesses are welcomed by the community and how the community is involved?
Absolutely. I want to say thank you so much for that question because it gives me an opportunity to say thank you for the community. The community makes Baldwin and Company what it is today. So without the support of the community, we would not exist. We would not be able to thrive. Our business is considered a third space, and it is the place where individuals come to find their muse. Individuals that come and they are able to find the best versions of themselves when they walk into the space. In Chinese philosophy, there is a saying in terms of how they connect energy with the transformation of people and movements in society. And that's one of the things that we're doing with Baldwin and Company is the energy inside of Baldwin and Company that when you walk in, we are allowing the heart to create the environment. See, so many times we talk about, and I know for me, growing up in New Orleans in the 80s, you know, murder capital of the country, you know, I would hear a lot of my friends talk about, you know, I'm a product of my environment. You know, when they fall into despair, fall into a life of crime, it was always, I'm a product of my environment. And one of the things that I wanted to do was show individuals that you don't have to be a product of your environment, but you can create your circumstances. Like, allow your heart to create the environment. Don't allow the environment to poison your heart. So one of the things that we're doing is making sure that we're creating that environment. We bring in some of the most prominent thought leaders in the country to discuss ideas. You know, one of the things that we also do is making sure that we're providing the resources for other individuals to learn how to gain ownership. Does anyone know what is the #1 form of wealth creation in this country? Just shout it out.
Home ownership.
Real estate. Not the stock market, it is real estate. Owning. Because back to Andre's point, there is not a more substantial way of building wealth, particularly generational wealth, without real estate and home ownership. So part of our partnership is with Credit Human. They are right next door to Baldwin and Company. Not only are we offering free financial literacy classes every single month to everyone in the community, but we're also making sure that we're providing fair lending practices to everyone to combat some of the ramifications from redlining that ran our city rampant in the ground. So we're trying to combat that by making sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to own your home at a fair interest rate with favorable loan terms. We also hold free classes every single month that we are going to teach you what those 300 pages that I'm sure no one reads when you're signing a mortgage document. We're going to teach you what every single one of those clauses are. So even if you do not get a home loan with us through Credit Human, you are fully aware of what predatory lending looks like and what the terms you should seek look like. So that's some of the things, just to, I don't want to take up too much time, but that's some of the things in terms of what we're doing to making sure that we're equipping the community with the tools that they can thrive. And I will say this, one of the things that we're also making sure is providing entrepreneurs with opportunity. Lamar talked about how we are above average in terms of entrepreneurs. We are making sure that we're providing loans, favorable loans to entrepreneurs to build ideas to combat some of the issues with SBA. Right now, the SBA has an approval rating for whites at 47.8% is the approval for whites, 19.3 for Asians, 8.7 for Mexicans, for Hispanics, 8.3 for Hispanics, and it is just barely at 4% approval for blacks applying to the SBA. So we have a lot of black entrepreneurs who are looking for funding who are unable to get that. So we can't necessarily get ownership of our homes, we can't get ownerships of our business, we can't get funding for our ideas. So one of the things that we're doing at Baldwin & Company is creating these resources available to you to fund your ideas, your businesses, in your homes, in your generational wealth.
Dr. Perry, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen around the country when it comes to helping people get home ownership, things like down payment assistance, et cetera?
Yeah, all across the country, as was mentioned, home ownership is the most common way to build wealth, particularly among black Americans. I just want to make a note that when you're looking at wealth distribution across other races, for whites and Asians, it's much more, there's a higher emphasis on the stock market. We are much less involved in the stock market, but for black African Americans, it's real estate. That the gap is not a result of what we don't know, right? Understand there were policies in place that allowed for intergenerational wealth transfer. Your credit scores are partially a reflection of whether or not your grandfather owned property or not. Not whether you're willing and able to buy a home, not if you're ready, you can't do it, because we know that there are thousands of people in every market who are paying rent every single month, sometimes for generations, yet they can't get the down payment to acquire the property. This leads me to my, one of the things I'm high on are special purpose credit programs. Special purpose credit programs are programs that are designed where a financial institution can change the underwriting practices to provide a product to meet people where they are. Why that is important, many of these products are actually outperforming traditional loans. Now, our CDFIs, our credit unions, and other our black banks are mostly neighborhood serving institutions. We need to capitalize these institutions because right now they are able to offer these special purpose credit programs in some respect. The Trump administration did kneecap the Freddie and Fannie so they won't be sold on the secondary market, which is critical, but for a time being, we can still issue these special purpose credit programs. And if we do, and this is connected to business, most people start their businesses using the equity in their home, right? You don't get business development without home ownership in this country. You know, if you don't have the collateral, and one more thing, we always focus on home ownership. We also need to put a spotlight on commercial real estate. About 80% of all commercial real estate is owned by 1% of people, your top earners. Why is that important? Because 43% of all of the wealth generated from real estate comes from the commercial side. So all of these things are important. I tend to say it starts at home with home. It starts with owning a home, but it also, and shout out to the chapter on business that we're going to, as part of the New Orleans Index, there is a chapter on business development, and we're showing that black-owned employer firms are showing high growth. Some of this is not just because of coincidence. It's because like organizations like Propeller are providing the support needed to entrepreneurs. It's because of DJ and others, Flozell, who's worked at the state and now in foundation, the Foundation for Louisiana and now Babcock. There's an impact. And so for me, but I focus on home ownership because it's so vitally important for all these other things to work.
Let's go back to Sarah. You talked about violence intervention as one of the alternatives to policing in this community, but also talk about some of the work you're doing on alternatives to incarceration as well.
Yeah. So I think the thing, if folks don't get anything from me, I want you to get that the safest communities are the thriving communities. And so when we are thinking about how we can address the underlying causes, what that looks like actually is trying to divert people from the criminal legal system. And some of that diversion has looked like literally diversion programs where people are able to work with folks like the Center for Restorative Approaches, and people are able to receive mentorship and all of these other things, right? And when I think about those, when I think about that investment, and how you actually make sure that thriving communities are coming to fruition, that has looked like a lot of our work with the Big Easy Budget Coalition. And actually getting, you can't just, like regular folks, right? We can't just create a diversion program, right? You need government, right? You need a government partnership. And in order to get your government to do anything, sometimes you have to yell at them. And so you really have to advocate for those things to occur, right? Yeah, there's a lot of yelling. And so what that has looked like with the Big Easy Budget Coalition is talking to communities and finding out that, well, we need more programs that are addressing the trauma, or addressing mental health issues, addressing education, and all of those things, and in order, and presenting that to city council members and making sure that they understand that. And making sure that the money actually follows that. So the Big Easy Budget Coalition over the past 2 years has been able to move $81 million towards diversion programs, affordable housing, which also does include some of this, like some of the best indicator of a future homeowner is a stabilized renter, right? And so making sure that people have homes that they're able to be in, and making sure that issues that have put them in sight of the criminal legal system are being taken care of, right? I think something that is important to think about also is that we have seen, because of what we were talking about with the issues related to the pandemic and the destabilization since then, and the uptick in crime that now is going down, we saw that people wanted to create new ways to get young people into the system. And so we, the push and the diversion has been to make sure to defeat bad policy that comes from, our
Can you just talk about some of those policies that were trying to be passed?
Yes, for sure. So I think I'm going to spoil us first to say we won. So we won. But what our supermajority and the governor had come up with their number one idea was, let's get more kids into adult prisons and jails, and run them through the system, and figure out other ways to make the actual criminal legal system and the courts more run in our favor. And what we were able to do was, through multiple coalitions coming together, shout out to Liberty and Dignity Coalition, shout out to the No on Them All Y'all campaign, and the No on 3 campaign. What we were able to do is talk directly to constituencies, talk directly to our neighbors, and people who might have been like, well, the kids these days, they're a little bit wild. And we're like, no, actually, the kids these days are just like the kids yesterday. Yes. They're the same, and kids are kids. And what we were able to do was amplify those messages, speak to people who are regular voters, Black voters. We targeted chronic Black and Democratic voters, the base of people who needed to be educated about what to do. We were able to, and thanks to your, PSA, actually, we were able to get that message out to more people, because, yes.
Happy to do it.
Yes. John Legend happens to be more interesting than me on a video. Who would have thought? Is it debatable? I don't know. It's not. And so we were really able to do a lot there. And I think it's really critical that people understand that, sometimes you have the voter apathy. People are like, what can we even do? this machine is moving so quickly, and actually we can do a lot together. We can actually, you know, we take care of each other. And people need to know that. So it was a big moment to be able to defeat those amendments, but it was also big because we're going to be able to do so much more now.
And just to level set, we're the most incarcerated country in the world, and Louisiana usually is one of our most incarcerated states in the country, usually right around #1 or close to it. And so if you believed that incarceration was the key to safety, then you would think that Louisiana is the safest state on the planet. There's no place safer because it's so good at locking people up, but that is not the case. So let's just remind ourselves that we've been trying the other way for a long time, locking more and more people up, locking them up as young as possible for as long as possible for a long time, and that has not made this place the safest place in the world. And so why don't we try some other ideas? Why don't we try some other ideas? And I'm so glad we were able to work together to make that happen. Flozell, talk a little bit about the work you do around philanthropy and how important philanthropy is, and what do you tell folks with checks to write? What do we need here in New Orleans? What do we need in this region? What are some of the things that you're looking at to invest in?
Yeah, you know, John, like one of the biggest stories of Katrina, especially for those of us who were here before, and you saw Lamar's chart about this, we're one of the most underinvested and philanthropically poor communities. And I want to put a pin in that, because at the community level, we're philanthropically rich. And you see some incredible things, right, from a mutual aid perspective and how we actually move. But institutionally, that's been a challenge. Katrina hits, we have this devastation, this catastrophe, and all of a sudden you see a reasonable, equitable representation of philanthropic investment to respond to the enormity of the storm. And so what the shift was, we had the resources finally to invest in the thing that we always had, the beautiful creativity of our people, the wisdom and brilliance of our people, who had already been building and had created one of America's star cities. This is one of the top 5 places in the world to be, and they did it without the resources. And so when we were faced with rebuilding, what it looked like was folk coming together, leaning on one hand on the wisdom and experience and brilliance of folks like me and others in this room who lost everything. They had nowhere to go and nothing to do it with. And we were able to partner with Brookings early on, PolicyLink early on, all the local experts, and I'm looking at Allison Plyer, who I became a grant maker because you used to be able to call Ask Allison. Right, so we've had expertise in this space for years, really tapping into ourselves. And what did we see? We saw things like the creation of the Equity and Inclusion Campaign at the Disaster Recovery Foundation, where people in community from Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama got together in a federal messaging campaign. We were doing narrative before it became popular, by the way, and policy campaign, so they could go to DC and represent themselves specifically for the purposes of recovery. And we saw those same people show up years later, because once you know how to lead, it is the gift they can't take from you. We saw the same thing with the Neighborhood Organizing and Planning Fund, where folks got to redo the city's master plan. And even in this moment, we have things that, looking at Christy Slater out here, who literally created the Together Initiative. I remember the day she created it. Just said, well, we're gonna tea here and there. And what came out of that was something called Housing NOLA. For the first time, we really get to have a group that's looking out for people, measuring both what works from an affordable housing and access perspective, but also doing the mission critical work of building the power to push for the thing that is hard to do when you're in the public sector or when you have corporate interests pushing against you. We could give a lot of examples. The key to this, John, has been philanthropy, trusting the people who know how to do the work, philanthropy centering the people who are most impacted by the work, and moving their resources and moving all of their resources, not just the grant making line, right? I'm looking at the Kellogg Foundation, who's moved both grants and PRIs. We created a PRI-funded foundation for Louisiana. And so that organizations like ASHE, under Asali's leadership, can have access to all the resources necessary, not just to buy the block, but to develop the block, and to make sure that it's accessible for people and do the things that are going to really elevate and lift our lives.
Let's talk about, thank you. Let's talk about the broader climate right now politically. Now, we're in a blue city in a very red state, in a country that's pretty red right now too when it comes to who's in leadership. Now, when you think about all the policies that implies, how do we push back on a local level to be as resistant and resilient to some of the overreach that the state and the federal government are going to put on this community? How do we think about ways to band together as a community to make sure we're fighting for our priorities here? Anybody can answer that.
I mean, I'm happy to talk about how we make sure that, people are working together across disciplines. So, yes, criminal justice person, but you must work with the business folks, you gotta work with the education folks, you have to make sure, that the environmental folks are in the room. And so those kind of multidisciplinary, cross-cutting partnerships are actually what get us a deeper change and just more, a mindful, there's a word that I'm looking for, but it's deeper change, okay? So just something that really lasts, sustainable. I think sustainable is the word I was looking for. And so, what that's looked like is having, for instance, the Liberty and Dignity Coalition come together and educate people locally. It's also looked like having the Big Easy Budget Coalition educate city council members and push city council members' staff and really look at the budget and say, so this is what we know is working. This is what the neighborhood has said about what we need. One of the things that Vera also does is we run with the Big Easy Budget Coalition a community survey about what do you want in your neighborhood. And you'll be shocked, probably not, that community members want education services, recreation for young people, housing. That's what they want. The first thing they say is not police. They're not like, we need more cops in this neighborhood. They'll tell you all the other things first. And sometimes, city council members will be like, what are you talking about? Because I'm planning on funding this part of the criminal legal system. But actually, that's not the thing that's gonna get us safe and be sustainable. And so I think helping them get to where they need to go, so constituencies, that is a lot of the way that we push back and make it very untenable, right, for our government or our governor or the people who don't represent us, who are supposed to represent us. They say they do, but you can see that they don't. There is a pathway that we have to show them what we actually need and then continue to work collaboratively and across different disciplines in order to get what we really need. So that relationship is what's really, really key, I would say.
And I think understanding our power, we have the power to push back on state legislation. We have to focus on our policies. Like I would say, become well-informed of policies that are being handed down. I know everyone is short on time, and you may not have time to go through and read potential bills, but I would like to encourage everyone to download an app called Causes. And it's a phone app, and it will keep you informed of every single, you type in your area code, and it will tell you who your elected officials are, and it will also tell you every time that they sign a bill. And if you don't like the bill that they are proposing or pushing forward, you can send a message through the app and tell them that you do not agree with this.
I like this. I haven't heard of this app. I'm gonna check it out.
It's called Causes. It's actually been around for quite some time. It's changed name, but just stay informed and understand that even at a municipal level, we have the power to change state policies being enacted on us.
Yeah, and I would jump in really quick to say locally, so for folks in New Orleans, I know we're being simulcast elsewhere, but the Power Coalition also does this sort of thing for us too, to help us know, find out who your elected officials are, what are the policies that actually affect your life, and how can you do something about them, who can you call?
And one of the assumptions we make is that local officials have the wherewithal to know what to do and how to do it. And so one of the great innovations that we saw post-Katrina that we've gotten away from, quite frankly, is supporting where it was values aligned and was best practice, an opportunity for public sector actors to get the advantage of either philanthropic resources or coalition work with community groups and other experts to really push and drive the change that is necessary. I think we also have to deepen our understanding and analysis about how racialized these decisions are. We keep operating in a bit of a vacuum, like we don't have 300 plus years of history at our back, where all of this was designed to undermine the lives of black folk and indigenous folk and women folk and queer folk.
You're not allowed to talk about that anymore. It's only the bright stuff.
Yeah, well, listen,
We
some
came
of
to the
us,
wrong place.
look, but I tell people, some of us are free. And so,
Talk about it.
if you're lucky enough to be free, right, but it's why we keep messing up, I think, because sometimes when you don't remember that these systems were
Yes.
never designed to work for us, that's not an antagonism, it is not a point of separation, it is an opportunity to build community. We get to know each other and see each other.
Yes.
And then our resources can follow accordingly. And the last thing I'll mention real quickly is we've gotten away from building political power. We're scared to have a C4 discussion. We're scared to have a community-based political conversation where power is built so that we can keep and expand the franchise. Now, for some of us, that does not work. Like, I'm a C3 funder, let me say for the record. But in my life, we move resources and we build community around the power of politics. And when we don't do that, someone said something about if you're not at the table, you're going to be on the menu.
Amen. And on that note of history, there's a museum here in the city that I was able to visit last time I was here, just connecting the dots between slavery and mass incarceration, and the historical connection. And this is why they don't want us to know our history. They don't want us to teach our history to our young people, is because when you see those connections, it informs how you talk about policy today, because it impacts policy today. So our mass incarceration policies that are doing so much damage in our communities right now, they have roots in that history that they don't want us to talk about. And if we don't understand that history, it's hard for us to fight in the present and for the future for what we need. And so we have to make sure we resist and that we are continuing to be free to talk about our history and make sure our young people know our history. Yeah. How much more time do we have? Okay, you're telling me to cut it off. Do we have a closing question here? Let me get to my last page. We'll do a speed round. What's one message each of you in 30 to 60 seconds or less? One message you want everybody to walk away with.
I'll close out with my message.
Okay, we'll start with Flozo.
Andre's cheating. Now, you don't get to. I was over here for that reason. No. It's the same message I always have. Like, we lead in this work from a perspective of joy and justice. These are our birthrights, and we get to, both in our families and across our communities, exercise those birthrights from a philanthropic perspective, because that's the lane I'm in. We have to fund the people doing the work, and we have to fund them at every level. If you can't fund organizing, fund the policy advocacy. If you can't fund that, fund the data and the research. If you can't fund that, fund the buildings and the land acquisition, because we have to take our land back. Find a way to be in coalition with other funders in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and across the Gulf Coast. People know how to do this work. We just have to invest in them.
All right.
I'm gonna do 30 seconds. Was that 30 seconds?
That was good. That was good.
Okay, okay. So I will just say very quickly, safe, thriving communities are the key to resilience. And so we actually have to sustainably invest both our time and our focus and our resources in creating safety through investment in upstream prevention. And that change is best when it's collaborative and responsive to the needs of the people who are closest to the problem.
That's right. Community-led, collaborative. I love it. DJ?
I think to piggyback off what Sarah said in terms of like creating thriving communities, according to national research, for every 1,000 residents, you should have 10 acres dedicated to community space, that being YMCA's, bookstores, parks, recreational, and right now New Orleans has 4. We dedicate 4 acres for every 1,000 residents. So we are far, far below the recommended average for a thriving community. So one thing I will say, in terms of like opening up businesses, I'm a huge advocate for opening up businesses as a business owner myself, but I think that particularly we have a responsibility, especially in the Black community, to make sure that we are creating more than a marketplace, but we are also creating spaces for movements. And
Community
I'll leave with that.
spaces.
Yes.
Well, I think I'm supposed to close this out.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say I'm so grateful for everyone's wisdom and contribution today. As you can see, there's so much talent and intellect and ingenuity in this community. We got to see it all around town today, and there's so much here, so many resources to draw from right here. We just have to continue to invest in them to make sure we build those thriving communities that we all need to stay safe and have real well-being.
Give him a round of applause. So I want to send some special thanks to a bunch of people before I close out with a message. I want to thank Kresge Foundation, especially Wendy Jackson, for support, the Brookings and CCU. Give them a round of applause. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their overall generous support of my center and our work. I'd also like to thank the folks at Brookings who, along with the data center, made this work possible. Keisha Middlemass, Hannah Love, Joe Kane, Adi Tomer, the Metro's Com, Krista Lanning, my whole team at Brookings, Manon Donahue, Anthony Fiano, Hannah Stephens, my VP, my boss, Rob Puentes. And there's so many, there's other authors here. I saw Doug Harris, who wrote the education chapter, Allison Plyler, who's doing incredible work. I see my friends and families here from all over the country, too many to name. I just will say this. When I first walked in Ashe, I looked over that direction because that's where my 3-year-old son used to do his drumming classes. I mean, he would beat the drum, beat the drum, beat the drum. And then I happened to do the walk the block. And by the way, I do apologize. Someone texted me. They said, I saw you on Bayou Road. I heard you were on Claiborne. I heard you were on O.C. Haley. When you come to Gentilly, you know. So I apologize. But in each of those places, we saw people who are doing incredible work. The data center has put forth an index of 20 that has a lot of data, and some of it is sobering. I refuse to mask over the great work that many of you in this room and others throughout the city has made this place a better place. There are still people who question whether or not they should invest in New Orleans. Now, a lot of people know me from my work on housing devaluation. We found homes in Black neighborhoods are much more valuable than they are priced, right? I will not devalue the doers of New Orleans, right? It is our response to the data that is the final measure. It's the final measure. So please go to the New Orleans Index at 20, read all the reports. You find Robert Collins and all this smart work. But it is ultimately fueled by you. Because when we all beat the drum, beat that drum that we are worthy of investment, is when change happens. So without further ado, I'm going to have the drums sound because Kings of Brass is going to lead us out of here in New Orleans style. But thank you, and Asali for hosting us here, and thanks for all of you for coming. It's been a wonderful event.